Welcome to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein, and my guest today is going to give us an opportunity perhaps to understand this very, very complicated and difficult world we are now living in. My guest is a scientist. She is not only a scientist, she is a virologist, someone who studies viruses. And her name is Anna Skalka. And Dr. Skalka has been co-author of several textbooks on virology. And she's also written a book recently called Discovering Retroviruses, Beacons in the Biosphere. And Dr. Skalka, welcome to the program, Backstory.
Thanks very much. It's nice to be with you.
Thank you, Anne. Now, the most important question we want to ask you, and of course the biggest one is, what is a virus?
Well, a virus is a bit of genetic information wrapped in a protein shell that protects it. And it's all of these viruses have projections on their cells so that they can attach to projections on their capsids so that they can attach to a susceptible cell. Viruses are really totally inert. They can't do anything on their own. And when they enter the cell by attachment of this thing called a spike, they get into the cell and they essentially dissolve. The only thing that remains is the genetic material. And the genetic material then takes over the program of the host cell and induces it to make more virus particles. And these virus particles either get secreted out of a cell or the cell packs up with so many of them that they burst and into the environment, waiting for the next, their encounter with the next susceptible cell. And the secret of viruses is they produce so many of them so that even if one doesn't find its host, another one will. And that's the way they reproduce and have done so through evolution.
Interesting. Now, of course, we know about people getting sick today and in the past several years. Have there been epidemics in the past in history that were also the result of the invasion of the viruses?
Oh yes, there have been many epidemics through history. Let's see, there's evidence actually of poliovirus in Egypt, ancient Egypt. And we get that information from looking at the ancient vesicles where you can see people with a leg that is distorted, which is a sign of polio. There's evidence of smallpox on Egyptian mummies. We know that viruses have been with us really since the beginning of time. And some scientists believe that viruses were there with the very first cells. In fact, they may have been there before the very first cells. So they're ancient entities indeed.
Interesting. And here we are today with a tremendous worldwide sweep of the virus. And people are still struggling in understanding what do we do? How do we help ourselves? How do we help each other? And so that kind of falls into the question of public health. And, you know, what can we be doing? What should we be doing that maybe we aren't? And what should our leaders be helping us to do? Any thoughts on the subject, Dr. Skalka?
Yes, well, I think the medical community and scientists have been saying from the very beginning that we do have ways to prevent being exposed to the virus. And those, as I said, a virus doesn't have any way of locomotion. It doesn't have any way to find its host. It has to float around and wait for probability. So we can prevent that by two things. First of all, if one is infected, if you wear a mask over your face because the infection is all for the most part the virus is in the upper respiratory tract initially. If you wear a mask over your face, when you cough or sneeze, the virus that gets expelled at that time is trapped in your mask, and it can't infect someone else. And if you who are non-infected also have a mask, even if some of them get out into the environment, they won't get at you because you have a mask to cover your face. And also, of course, your eyes. We now know that the virus can enter through the eyes as well. And so you want to cover your eyes either by wearing glasses or goggles, or you can see that health workers wear these preventive masks that cover their whole faces. So that's one way. The other way we contact the virus is through touching things. So the virus, when the person is infected and they cough, the virus can go off into the environment. It can fall on surfaces, and it stays viable for a while on surfaces. So if you happen to touch a surface and get it on your hands, well, you can't get infected on your hand with your hands with the coronavirus. But of course, most of us touch our face, either scratching or rubbing our eyes, or so that's when the virus can get in. So the advice is to wash your hands, wash them frequently. That's very easy to do. So wear a mask, eyeglasses, wash your hands. And the other thing to do is to try to avoid people who might be infected. And so that's to keep your distance from anybody that you meet. 6 feet at least is asked for. And to stay out of crowded places. And now, when we're getting into the cold weather, to stay out of places where lots of people congregate in closed enclosures. So here, when the virus gets into the air, it can float around and stay there. And so you can get infected in those places more frequently or easily than if you're outside, where there's lots of breezes and the virus gets diluted and you don't have to worry. So this is a very, very difficult time now. And because we're all coming inside as it gets colder, we have the holidays now, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we want to be with our families, but we have to be very, very careful. Stay out of crowds, wash your hands, wear your mask. And those are very, very effective ways of keeping from getting infected from the virus.
Oh, those are wonderful points, and we hear them, but not everyone seems to adhere to them. Not everyone seems to believe, I suppose, that it's going to protect them. So what does it take to give that message so that people will apply these principles of safety, of public health?
Well, it takes strong leadership. Yes. And a message that is persistent and based on science. And unfortunately, we haven't had that in our government or in our top government, and that's been a bad thing, because people get confused. They don't know what's right. And right now, what's happening is people are getting tired. They're getting what someone has called COVID fatigue. And if they hear someone saying from the top, somebody in authority, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, they're tempted to think it doesn't matter, but actually it does. So I would say, listen to your medical experts. They know, they have your health in best interest. The hospitals and the medical people are being really overwhelmed now again as we enter this fall additional peak in infections. And they're at risk too, taking care of people. So they don't want anyone to get infected. Listen to them. They will really give you the best information. Hopefully we'll get some better messages from the top in future, but unfortunately it hasn't been that way, and people have gotten confused. Don't be confused. listen to the medical and listen to the CDC. They have a wonderful website that gives you good information and helpful hints.
Yeah, the Center for Disease Control
Yes.
definitely is something that people should be paying attention to. I just read in my newspaper this morning of a place somewhere in the Midwest, I think, where some kind of people came from all over the country, young people, and I don't know whether it was motorcycles or what, all congregating, no masks, and so forth. And as they went back to their respective states and homes, many of them were sick. And it's like, well, what is it you don't understand? What is it you don't get here? Perhaps I think, no, I served on the New Jersey State Public Health Council for a number of years, appointed by the then governor of New Jersey. And very often it's people not being able to understand that there are situations that they have to comply with that would be helpful to everyone's health. And yet for some reason, it's like a challenge to their independence. Like, let me prove I'm stronger than you. Let me prove I know better than you. When in fact they don't. Now, of course, you've said leadership is a key issue. When we've had some wonderful governors in New Jersey and other states, New York, who've given us the message and given us the leadership. But there certainly needs to be national and international as well. I mean, there's resurgence now, I understand, in Italy and other countries. It comes and it goes, right?
Yes, yes, it's getting very bad all over Europe. And I think it's the same problem. People want to get back to what they think is the normal life.
Right.
Tired of it. It's been months. They want to enjoy the holidays, and they're slipping, and they're letting down their guard. For young people, it's true that young people do not get as severe, on average, as severe disease from this virus, but they do get sick and they do transmit the virus. And so it's their responsibility to help others, because when you transmit the virus, you're helping it spread, even though you're not sick. So I don't know how to get that message through to young people, but that's, I think, critical.
Yes, according to what I've read, the younger people have a better immune system or a weaker immune system, so therefore they don't get as sick. Is that what you've discovered?
Well, we still don't know. There's lots of things we don't know about this virus.
Okay.
We don't know exactly why young people are less susceptible. The evidence is that they can get infected, and they have titers of virus as high as anybody, and they can spread it, but they don't get as sick. And we don't really know why yet. So as I said, there's lots of mysterious things about this virus, and we still have work to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you cover much of that in your book, your new book, Discovering Retroviruses, Beacons in the Biosphere?
Oh, that book is mainly about retroviruses. The virus, like the virus that causes AIDS. And we still have an active pandemic of that virus in the world. And in many ways, there have so far been 1.3 billion people, or million people worldwide that are infected with the coronavirus, but there are that have died from the coronavirus, 1.3 million. But with the retrovirus HIV and AIDS, there are 31 million deaths. So it is a very serious virus as well. And in that book, I talk about what we've learned from studying retroviruses about cancer, about AIDS, about how to treat viruses, and also about evolution. So that's a kind of good primer for virology if people are interested.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it. And you were a professor at the Chase Fox Cancer Center in Philadelphia.
Fox Chase Cancer Center, right.
Yeah,
So,
Fox Chase Cancer Center. So that when you were doing your work there, were you looking at things in relation to cancer as well?
well, we know that about 15 to 20% of human cancers are caused by viruses. So viruses are very important for to study in a cancer center. So yes, I was involved in some of the basic features of viruses and how they can cause disease. And I did study HIV among other viruses, some viruses that cause cancer in animals, such as a chicken virus that causes Rous sarcoma virus. But I think most people today are focused on the coronavirus. So I wanted to show you a picture of, we have a new publication, a textbook on virology, and the cover is coronavirus. This is you can see, these are the kind of spike proteins that I talked about that are on the outside of this capsid, and the genetic material is buried inside. And these spikes are like a lock, a key that goes into the lock on the outside of the cell. So there we are. It's very appropriate for people who are interested. Now this is a textbook not for the general public, as my other book is, but it's a book that is good for students, graduate students, undergraduates, and medical students. But these little gray things are antibodies, and those are the things that our bodies make to protect us, right? So what they do is they can contact these spike proteins here and here and here and prevent that key from going into the lock. And that spike protein is really the protein that is most important now in attempts to make vaccines to the virus, because if we can interrupt the function of that spike protein, then the virus cannot enter a cell and it can't do anything.
This is the 5th edition, isn't it, of this textbook that you're co-authoring?
This is the 5th edition of the textbook, and I am a co-author, and another co-author is my Fox Chase colleague, Dr. Glenn Rawle, at Rockefeller University, Dr. Theodora Hatziano, at Columbia University, Dr. Vincent Bracaniello, and my friend, neighbor, and colleague, Princeton University professor, Jane Flint. So Princeton has a lot to do with this book, in fact. But it's the 5th edition, and it's the book most widely used by various universities, not only in the United States, but worldwide, to teach virology to students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we talk about trying to find some way to help our system or our immune system, and we talked a little bit about vaccines. Yes. So what do we know at this point about vaccines that might be effective in working with this virus? Well,
we're lucky with this virus. We still don't have a vaccine for HIV, but with this virus, we have a hope. And there are, I think, 4 frontrunners in the attempt to make a vaccine for this virus. 2 of them make a vaccine by taking a common cold virus, deactivating it or gutting its genetic material, and putting the genes for that spike protein of the coronavirus, in its genetic material, so that when this Trojan horse of a virus infects a cell, it carries with it the information for making that spike protein. And then that spike protein is made in our bodies, and our bodies respond by making antibodies and other cells that will bind to that, components that will inactivate the coronavirus if we should get infected. So that's how those vaccines work. And there are two places where that's being done. One of them is in Johnson & Johnson. and they have a very good candidate that's, I think, in phase 3 clinical trials. Another one is AstraZeneca. And then there are 2 other front runners, also very close to being, they're in phase 3 trials, which they're being tested in thousands of people. Those are based on using just the genetic material of the virus and injecting and getting that into cells by various ways. And so they don't have this Trojan horse aspect to them. They just put the genetic material right into people, and then the genetic material makes that spike protein. And again, the idea is that the body will then form antibodies to this spike protein.
How how close are we, do you think? And I know it's a guess on your part because nobody's quite sure, but how close do you think we are to having a vaccine?
We will know pretty soon, and it really looks like many of these vaccines, or these 4 at least, could be, they do make antibodies after the people are being, it's injected into people or animals, they do make antibodies. And we know that they'll probably be effective in that sense. But the thing that you have to worry about with vaccines is that they're safe. Because you see, you're going to use them and to inject them into thousands, millions of people who are not sick. And you have to be sure that this vaccine will give a protective response without damaging the person's health. So you have to make sure they're not only effective, make antibodies, but they're safe. And it's that safe problem that makes it so difficult to say early on, because you have to test it out on thousands of people before you know that it's not going to hurt anyone. And we think that we'll know a little bit more about that at the end of the year, or maybe the beginning of next year. But it'll be a while.
There are categories of people that some are considered more at risk than others, whether it's by age, is it by gender?
Wear a mask and your eyeglasses, and wash your hands, and keep a distance, and stay out of crowded places, indoors especially.
Yeah, I see. But I mean, how about the people who are perhaps more at risk, like people in nursing homes, where we hear that there have been outbreaks?
Yes, that is really difficult, because those poor people have to have people taking care of them. They need care workers, and if any of them get infected, but they're terribly vulnerable, and they have what we call comorbidities. They're diabetic, or they have other heart disease or whatever problem that makes them even more susceptible. So that's difficult. But the other thing that we have coming along are synthetic antibodies, that are produced by biotechnology now in mice, or so that we can use those antibodies now. So some of them have been very successful. Our president was treated with antibodies to the virus, and apparently they were very effective in damping down his infection. So there is some hope that in the absence of a vaccine in the very near future, we will have antibodies that will be injected into people, so they'll be protected from the virus if they come in contact with it. So we have other kinds of ways to treat this pandemic, and especially for people who are at special risk.
Well, Dr. Anna Skalka, you are so knowledgeable and so helpful. I think so many people have these questions and don't know which way to turn. And of course, there's also people who create disbelief for their own reasons. And so, as you say, listen to the medical community Don't disregard public health. I did speak to someone, I won't say who it was, but someone who I know who lives somewhere in the West who thinks wouldn't go. I said, did you get your flu shot? No, he doesn't. He's heard bad things about the flu shot. And did you, are you wearing a mask? No, no, he's listening to contradictory information, which is harmful to him and to everyone around him. And so how about the business of the flu shot, by the way?
Yes. Well, I've got my flu shot, and I'm sure you did too.
I did.
Yes, it's very important because, first of all, it can be difficult to distinguish between flu and COVID. And you want to be able to distinguish clearly what you have. But flu is also a very serious disease, and especially in the elderly. So you want to get your flu shot. But can you imagine having flu and then also being exposed to COVID? I mean, that double whammy would be horrific. So I can't imagine why someone wouldn't want to get that little jab. It really doesn't hurt too much, and you can get it in pharmacy or anywhere. So please go out and get your flu shots.
Well, you have been wonderful and helpful. And that's what a wonderful scientist is. And Dr. Skalka and I know each other. We sometimes find ourselves walking outdoors amongst the trees. We're here in Princeton, and we started talking, and it became clear to me that she had so much to share and offer. And I said, would you be willing to be on my TV show? And she was definitely so. And I think those people who've been watching today can realize how much help it is to know and understand what is it we're dealing with, how should we behave, what do we need to do that we don't normally do, but we need to change our behavior, that is for sure. So thank you so much, Dr. Skalka, for coming to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. And I want to say goodbye and thank you today for coming to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. And goodbye.